A very warm welcome to all our viewers. Welcome to the Sentinels Newsmakers. My guest today is Mr. B Kalyan Charavarthy. He is the Principal Secretary, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Government of Assam. He, in fact, is one of the senior officials who has been very closely associated with the National Education Policy 2020. During my chat today with him, we are, of course, going to talk about what's next as far as Assam is concerned. What's next? How ready is Assam to implement this particular new policy? Will this policy also address issues such as access to education, accountability of teachers, and we will also talk about what is the thinking within the government as far as online classes are concerned for all those children who do not have proper access either to a proper net connectivity or do not have access to smartphones. What if schools are, the reopening of schools are further delayed? On all these things, we are now going to talk to Mr. Chakravarthy. Mr. Chakravarthy, thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome to Sentinels Newsmakers.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It's always a pleasure to be associated with Sentinel, which has really been the sentinel of most of the news as far as the Northeast is concerned. And I'm actually happy to share whatever whatever is to be known about the national education policy, our thinking, and it's still in its infancy, and therefore, it's an evolving subject, and therefore this could be taken as the first interview, not the final one, because policy is still evolving.
Absolutely. Yes, of course. And we would love to, keep coming back to you to get more answers to all the questions that people, the, academicians might have related to the policy and all the other issues related to the space of education in the state. So first up, I would want to know from you what actually, necessitated the national education policy. Why National Education Policy 2020?
So the National Education Policy 2020, to understand why and how it was thought of to be necessary. I think if you look at the way our country from the time of independence has progressed, initially we wanted at the time of the ex-president Radhakrishnan, we really were looking at having qualified manpower for our public sectors and for the higher education to take India forward. And very soon it was realized that we also need to, then there were other committees like the Mudaliar Commission, which looked at, vocational education and the other things. Thereafter, there was a very important committee, the Kothari Committee. The Kothari Committee, which looked at, education, universalization of education and, how education should reach everybody. And you're aware that education is a kind of the critical factor which entitles a person to really take a productive role in society. And then of course, while education became universal, then we had the right to education in the sense that it is a right of a citizen, a right of a child to say that I need to be educated. Now, that was up to class 8. Now, the thing is, there are 2-3 things which started, which were huge gaps in education. One is that class 8 is too low class by which a person really gets that maturity to really be able to meet the needs of society, employment to get to the employment opportunities, and to also to get into higher education. So the great leap is up to class 8, we were saying that we will take care of the children and that's your right. Now we're saying that, it's a paradigm shift where we say that from class 8, we are going up to class 12. So ultimately, we obviously would like education to be free up to, till whatever time it is, graduation or post-graduation. But there are resources, constraints. But then we have moved from elementary. Now we have also saying that, okay, you can actually, we need to provide for you till secondary education up to class 12. Hopefully sometime in the future, we will go even up to graduation. So that is a fundamental shift. But the second gap that was there
Yeah.
in the education was we somehow we see you see education is the most critical thing that defines the productivity of your demographic dividend, right?
Mhm.
If you're going to have youth who are employable, productive, only then your country can really move forward economically. Now, we have a lot of engineering graduates, science graduates, etc. But the kind of education, honestly, which really are when our graduates are coming out, do they have the ability to understand what they have learned, apply it immediately? Do they have that practical skills? Are they holistic individuals? Was a question mark. So in order to have a multidisciplinary approach, in order to bring out students who really understand what they have learned, so there were these were the concerns, because we talk about a demographic dividend, but is that
Yeah.
dividend productive? Is it a drag on the economy, or is it our advantage? To make it an advantage, we have
Mm.
to ensure we have an education policy which meets the needs of development that's happening. That is the reason why this education policy, as opposed to any other policy, because it defines the soul of the country, is so
Mm.
very important. Because if we have this wrong, then the future of the country would be doomed. But if we have this right, then we will be probably a superpower, or we will take our position in the community of nations. So that is why this education policy came about, because we are envisioning through this education policy that India will be able to utilize its demographic dividend to reach the
Mhm.
place it should. Yeah.
Okay. Now, coming to Assam, how ready do you think is the state to implement this particular policy?
So see, Assam government probably has been the first government, I would say, I wouldn't
Mhm.
be aware, but to the best of my knowledge, is the first government which has taken the most immediate step to constitute a committee to understand the complete facets of the new education policy, because it's such a comprehensive document.
Okay.
It pans out from pre-primary to
Mm.
school education to higher education, and there are so many things that have been said in this policy which require a very very deep analysis, both in terms of the infrastructural requirements, that's the brick and mortar, but
Mm.
also in terms of the kind of manpower that we need in order to achieve the objectives of the policy, to bring about that kind of an education which is holistic. We
Mhm.
therefore need both men and material. And how do we go about ensuring that we have both the men and material in place is very important. And therefore, Assam government was first of the block, you can say,
Mhm.
in terms of putting together a very experienced committee, which I'm also part of, and I've been given the responsibility of studying it in depth and
Mhm.
ensuring we set our milestones. And this is one policy, if we were to implement, will take Assam to being the best state in the country, the most productive state in the country. If we can implement this, we will not be uh, we will not be just another state. We could be the best state in the country. So, but then we need to plan out. We need to have a long-term vision, a medium-term vision, and an immediate short-term vision. We hopefully will bring out our documentation and be ready by the end of this year. So, I would be able to explain to you how ready we are in terms of that. We are ready in some ways, which probably, if you want, I can tell you what we are
Mhm.
already doing.
Yeah.
If you want specific things, I can tell you. Do you want me to say
Mhm.
that? For
Yeah,
example,
maybe some. Yes. Yeah.
some points, like for example, there was always this view that between the private sector, let's assume, just an
Right.
example, I'm giving you,
Yes.
between the private
Yes.
sector and the public education, there's a
Mm.
difference.
Absolutely.
Difference in terms of quality, and
Mm.
therefore it's a divide, as you were talking about earlier, the
Mm.
digital divide, the divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
So we find that there is a gradual movement of parents trying to
Mm.
take the children to private education because they believe
Mm.
that private education is better, right? So, and then the private education also charges heavily. So there
Right.
is a need to for fee regulation. So,
Mm.
for example, government of Assam has come out with the Fee Regulation Act.
Mm. Mm.
Now, so to ensure that excess fees are not charged there, the
Yes.
government of Assam has come out with a scheme called Pratyavan, in the
Mm.
sense like a challenge to have those kind of schools which are good or better than the private schools. About establishing about 1,000 schools in the state of Assam, which are better than them. In fact, the Adarsh Vidyalayas, if you see, which is again which was done by the Honorable Minister Shri
Mm.
Himant Biswa Sarma, their results are outstanding. It's almost like most of them are all above 90% in terms of their results. So we establishing models of excellence. We are trying to ensure that the fee structures in the private sector
Right.
are transparent and accountable, which is a part of the new education policy, but
Yes.
done earlier itself. And there are various other things, like for example,
Hmm.
rationalization of teachers, in the sense there are
Yes.
some teachers more in one school, there are some teachers which have just one teacher for
Mm.
various reasons. There is a lopsided, irrational sometimes distribution of teachers for
Yes.
various reasons of somebody is not well, therefore the teacher goes somewhere, etc. But
Mm.
the rationalization to see that all teachers are there in all schools according to the pupil teacher ratio, that was essential to be done, right? So for
Mm.
that also the government of Assam has come out with policies and models, and we
Yes.
are already putting in place what has been talked about. So I've just given you three
Hmm.
examples. There are a
Yes.
number of other examples like this, which the government of Assam had pre-thought this. So
Hmm.
in a way, we are happy that the education policy resonates with the thinking that we had. We're very happy with the education policy because it really goes into depth, and there are very
Right.
cool things that we can discuss further as we go
Hmm.
into your questions as to
Yes.
what education policy does. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, what you mentioned, the cabinet, the very recent cabinet decision regarding the fee issue, where the expert committee, I think has been set up. That was something that has been a major concern amongst most parents and guardians, particularly the fee structure in private institutions. Also, you touched upon the most important aspects that most guardians, most parents are concerned about as far as the education system is concerned. Now, as far as the higher education is concerned, what does this policy say? What are some of the major changes that we are going to see in the coming days in the higher education space?
So higher education space, as we can see, for example, I studied in IIT
Mhm.
and the IIM. I was a graduate of IIT Madras. And then I went to IIM Ahmedabad. I also, of course, studied in the Indian School of Business. So I have a couple of, you can say, post graduations there. And so-called, these were the so-called best institutions. But if I were to look at IIT, and when I look at both the IIT and IIM Ahmedabad, because these are the two best institutions in the country
Right.
today. One of the things I always felt, after that I did the IAS, right? So one of the things I sincerely felt from the
Mhm.
bottom of my heart was that while the IIT students were exceptionally intelligent, technically exceptionally intelligent, it looked as if a certain part of their life has become blunted by their ignorance of the social variables or the social factors affecting society. They wouldn't understand things about inclusive education. Most of the IITians, at least of my batch, would not be aware of how the government runs, what is political administration, what is political science, what is sociology, what is psychology, what does it mean for a person who is socially disadvantaged to get into education, right? Why do we really need to really extend what is the meaning of privilege? We talk about, for example, in the US, we talk about Black Lives Matter, right? So
Mhm.
similarly here,
Mhm.
why is it that a person who comes and is from a socially disadvantaged background or from an economically disadvantaged background, and these two things are different, why is it, it is why and how should education be so that the talent of more than 80% of the country is let's say unchained. So they wouldn't understand because most of the IITs and IIMs during my period of time were from the culturally privileged background, right? So the potential of the country was not unleashed. So this particular higher education, which the national education policy talks about, first of all, it says that there has to be a 50% gross enrollment ratio. Uh, which is a big target in the sense that most of the people after doing their class 12 actually don't get into college. But we're talking about 50% should complete the college. Second, we are saying that this divide between science, arts, or so-called social sciences, which are considered to be let's say inexact kind of sciences, that divide is now not there. In the sense, you could be doing engineering, you could be doing computer science, quantum physics, but you could also be doing social psychology, or you could be doing social sciences. So in the sense, it bridges the gap and it brings about a greater amount of respect towards both the sciences, because both these are essential for a society to run. If you want to be a good administrator, you want to be a good leader, it's not important to be just intelligent. You should have, as you say, EQ, emotional quotient. You have to have a social quotient and understanding, and therefore you can't be a great engineer, a great leader, until and unless you are both analytical as well as socially sensitive. So this gap between science and society has been bridged in this new education policy. Certain things are there, like for example, you enter into a particular course. Let's say I enter into, let's say, civil engineering, and after 1 year, I feel that I don't like this. I would like to do something else. Now, earlier you would have lost a year, but now in the new
Yes.
education policy, you don't lose that year, because if you do 1 year, you get a certificate that okay, 1 year you are good at civil engineering. If you do 2 years, you get a diploma in civil engineering, which has a value. If you do 3 years, you get a full degree. If you do 4 years, you get a degree with a research, in the sense that you are like at that level. So earlier we would say it's like a bank. In a bank, we store money, and today in a bank, we store our educational accomplishments. So we have credits, and in that bank, we say that I've done 1 year civil engineering, say 2 diplomas in physics, maybe one diploma or a course in arts. So our grading system or our banking system shows what in my bank is what I have learned, and all these add up to your educational accomplishments, and therefore your value in the employment market. So in a sense, today you don't fear that I'll leave some course, I've lost everything. So that is another thing that's important, and a few other things are there, of course, like there is a Indian Institute of Translation and Language that will come up. There's a National Education Technology Forum which will come up, which will encourage technology research, which India unfortunately had never focused upon. That will become extremely important in times to come, and there'll be a reduction. For example, MPhil will not be there, or there'll be a reduction and more core understanding of subjects than before. And see, we had also finally we had a couple of things like setting up of, we had a number of institutions. You had AICT, you had UGC, you had how a university needs to be affiliated, technical universities have to be. So it was not a single window, in the sense a university, universities were different kinds, and how do they get permissions would be a plethora of institutions, right? So the continuum between an autonomous college, an affiliating college, a university, this continuum has been defined, in the sense what we would like, what the education policy envisions in the future is that every district should have some sort of a higher educational institution, so that we can really get everybody into education systems. Second, there will be certain standards that will be set. Third, all these institutions would hopefully become autonomous in some sense, even if they are affiliated initially. Then some of the institutions can be research oriented or teaching institutions. And then, in order to get permissions and those standards, etc., a fast track mode of clearance will be there from the government, which will have a single window. And under that window, there will be
Okay.
all these verticals. Like, we have a vertical now. How our industry is funded, how
Mhm.
our industry standards set,
Mm.
how our industry is being governed, right? So all these things, these verticals which are there earlier, all these verticals would perhaps now the four independent verticals would come together. So whether it's
Right.
regulation, whether it is standard setting,
Mhm.
whether it is funding, or whether it is accreditation,
Mm.
all these things, these are earlier different verticals. Now they will all come under one umbrella,
One.
so that when you apply from a college, like you get all these things on one piece of paper, saying that okay, this, like
Mm.
like the ease of doing business, the ease
Right.
of college getting. So it'll become easier and
Mhm.
more uniform across the country, and so there will be an ability for every college, and also you also have clusters in the sense that you
Mhm.
don't have to. There will be clusters in the sense, more amount of integration between different colleges in this, especially the post-COVID time, where you will be able to, like do cross you can do cross university kind of studies also, and
Okay.
also an opening for foreign universities to be associated, because now is the time where we have lots of interaction with the best of universities across the world. So the ability for the higher education institutions to get the best, not only from the other institutions within the country, but from institutions across the world,
Okay.
is going to be easier. So how to go about establishing that is our job, and
All
how
right.
to ensure that, we set the standard,
Yeah.
we set the mechanisms, and we ensure that there is incentivization, because students have a tremendous enthusiasm, and we probably will have to bring together this enthusiasm and channelize it so that they get the best, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we hopefully do.
So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned about this, cross university thing. Suppose I am a student of, say, Guwahati University, and I want to do a certain course in Delhi University. So,
Yeah.
would you please explain that? How is that going to work out? What do I have to do?
So it's an evolving thing. It's an
Right.
evolving thing, as
Okay.
I said.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So,
I understand. So,
but what I do feel is right now also between universities there is students who go from here to there and come back.
mhm,
But
mhm.
now we have, of course, an ability. For example, when we're working itself, we can actually pick up courses and do
Yeah.
independent courses in universities, right?
Right. Yes.
And also get credits for it.
Mhm.
Certainly, it's evolving. I wouldn't like to put a name
Yes.
on that right now, but
Right.
I
Right.
feel that, this is something
Yes.
that
Got your point. Yeah. So,
needs to be done.
exactly. So basically, these are the broad guidelines there that you all are working on as far as this particular policy is concerned, and all the nitty-gritties and all the details will. I mean, you all will come up
Mm.
gradually, and you've already mentioned that by this year end, maybe you'll be in a better position to share with me all the other minute details regarding this particular policy. So also, you were, I think, referring to the Higher Education Commission of India that will look into the single window clearance that you were referring to.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so some experts feel that that might not be a very good idea.
Uh, I mean, see, it's a to be. I mean, obviously, we will discuss that
Yes.
probably in the internal discussions as to how that will work out, and
Yeah.
whether it's good or bad. But I can say one thing is there, that we need to set the standards.
Hmm.
We need to shorten the time.
Right.
We can't be like sending an application in the
Mm.
government and wait for it endlessly and then go from one
Absolutely.
institution to the other institution. So logic would say that rather have it in one place, people can come sit together and look at the university and say what are the things that the university needs, whether it's funding or
Right.
accreditation or
Mhm.
the standard setting, or like what is it that it needs, and then
Yes.
clear it off, and then have
Absolutely.
somebody to look at it, and then
Mhm.
then start, or help it go.
Mhm.
So that would be much, in my opinion, initially
Right.
would be
Right.
something that everybody would like. But obviously, what I'm saying is subject to the experts which we will be interacting with.
Absolutely.
I,
Absolutely.
as the convener for the state of Assam,
Mm.
would definitely take more educated, esteemed vice chancellors and the others who are there, advisors to the government, their views into consideration before
Yes.
seeing how this whole thing works out. Uh,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
also like in conversation with the government of India, of course. Yeah.
Yes. Now, we spoke about the changes that the policy talks about in the higher education space. Let's talk a little bit about the school education there. What are the kind of significant changes that we are going to see in the coming days?
Yeah. So school education perhaps is the foundation or the seed, right? Which probably will result in the entire flow of education to the higher levels. So one of the key things was the differentiation between people who are privileged and who are not privileged starts with pre-primary education. So a child who comes from a privileged background, when he's 3 years old to 6 years old, and you're aware that probably by 8 years, more than 85% of the brain cells are formed, and a child learns language, a child learns a lot of things, and it's at the stage where the brain growth is so phenomenal in terms of absorbing things around the child, that losing that period
Mhm.
and an inability because of social or economic reasons not to help a child learn languages, not to help a child become fluent, was something has been recognized in this policy. So, education, which used to start from class one
Right.
at the age of 5 or 6, has now gone down to from the age of 3. So, from the age of 3 to 6, be hoping that is the age which is the new education policy, instead of saying 10 plus 2, class 1 to class 10 plus 2 years, that is up to 12th and thereafter, has now gone from 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 and 7. That is the first block. So in the first block, that is up to class 2 now, a child will learn through his hands, will learn language, because language learning, when a child is small, is like a fish taken to water. He can learn any language. Now theory says that a child can learn about 6 languages fluently. He can learn maybe Sanskrit,
Mm.
Assamese, Garo, or French, Spanish, Chinese. I mean, all these 6 languages, if I have the ability, the teachers to teach, the child will swim in that waters and speak all the 6 languages fluently. So my ability to teach the child how many languages depends on my ability to have those kind of teachers and get it across to him. But in any case, we have 3 languages at least on the annual, that which is one is of course English, the other is your mother tongue, and it could be Sanskrit or Hindi or whatever is the other language that the parents and the school decides upon. So that's what we plan to do. But these are things, but we don't want to miss out the first phase of the child of learning a language and understanding the situation and give him the best. So that, I think, is a fundamental, I think, big difference in the national education policy, where we are saying the child, when he comes out of class 2, is able to speak fluently.
Mhm.
Like I said, like if you look at an American child, he learns only English. So when they're in
Right.
class 2, they speak fluently because it's the
Mhm.
mother tongue. It's like a mother tongue.
Mhm.
So we hope to make the child fluent by the time is in class 2. Now thereafter, class 3, 4, 5 is the second block. Now in the second block, the child will begin to learn a little bit of math, a little bit of science, and those kind of things, these basic concepts, he will begin to understand. So that is the second phase, where we're going to focus him to understand things in a more analytical way. Those are the three. Let's say the first is the preparatory, the stage where
Mm-hmm.
foundational preparatory stages we're going to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
then comes the stage of 6, 7, 8. Now 6, 7, 8, the kid is more or less understood, is good in language, he understands the basics of analytics, math, he can add, subtract, and all those kind of things. That is when we will introduce also vocational education. Now that's a it's a big thing in the sense that if you see that we have less than 5% of the kids in India who have an ability to do anything vocational, right? In fact,
Mm-hmm.
vocational education is looked at as something which is subpars. It's only for kids who don't really do well in education. That's not the case.
Yeah.
In South Korea, it's 95% of the kids are good at some vocational education. Look in America, 50% of the kids. Most of the developed world have more than 50%, 60% of the kids are good vocationally. We are not good with our hands. We are not good with actually producing something, and that really inhibits us. Now, when I was looking at those students who did vocational education, even in Assam, I see those kids who did vocational education. They were also doing extremely well in their final exam in class 10 and class 12. So, vocational education, actually, in fact, whether you actually continue in vocational education and go out or not, actually improves your mental skills too. So, vocational education would be mandatory for every kid. It is not an option, it's mandatory. So when a kid comes out, he will know, let's say in 15 days' time, it's called a bagless kind of exercise. He will know some kind of vocational skills, whether it's carpentry, whether it is like, it could be anything, electrical, electronics, plumbing, or whatever, but whatever he wants to, or art, craft, or something else. In fact, I was saying that something like even typing, we don't get to get a lot of good people in Assamese typing. I don't
Right.
know. It takes a kid about 15 days or a month to learn SMS typing. Like, we completely handicapped when we want to send a document across because we say, like, where do I get a typist? We don't get a typist.
Mm.
It's something that can simply be done. So there are
Yes.
so many things that need to be learned. Vocational education is one thing that will be done. And then, see, one more thing is about we always had this concept of curricular, co-curricular, and our
Mm.
assessment would be how good a student has done in
Yes.
marks, right? So it'd be now a 360-degree kind of a report card. The child
Okay.
won't be judged. See, there are two, three important things in education which everybody needs to know, and therefore, let me take a little bit more time on these three, 4 points
Mm.
which are
Sure.
critical. One of the things is a child has to be judged comprehensively. He can't be judged because he's doing well, only in education, right? So that's very important because the child, if he's doing very well in sports, he's doing very well in culture, he's doing very well in creativity, he's capable of actually doing an innovation and come up with a patent, maybe. Like, Bill
Mm-hmm.
Gates and others were dropouts and they became whatever they have.
Yes.
So we must be able to harness the talent of the kids and give them a holistic, and then view these kids as talented kids and see, like, where they can go, and not just look at academics. And academics alone will not be sufficient to say that he is the best in the class, right?
Mm.
So it has
Mm.
to be a comprehensive report card. That is one thing. The second thing is, uh, besides that, we see one more thing that I would like to
Mm-hmm.
emphasize is that, see, many of the languages which were there earlier were almost becoming extinct for various reasons. In India, according to the UNESCO report, about 190, more than 190 languages. In India, we speak about 220 languages. They say about 190 languages, just like, species become extinct,
Mm.
languages were becoming extinct in India, right? Because of lack of usage.
Yeah.
So the need to rejuvenate local cultures, needs, etc., has been felt, and therefore trying to bring in teaching in the language of one's own or mother tongue,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to teach to the extent possible in that would actually rejuvenate that language, make it alive, and then ensure that it doesn't die, and it
Right.
ensures its continued existence. The local cultures, the local traditions, the local knowledge would grow if you allow this thing to happen. English as a language will continue and as a means of communication. But to allow the local language to sustain itself, we'll have to give it the kind of priority that we are going to do in future. And also, fundamentally, like, there will be an assessment of both the
Mhm.
teachers, the students. See, what a couple of things is a student gets stressed out in class 10, class 12. Why?
Mm.
Because there's just one exam, and that exam is the end term exam, and we all wait for that end term exam, and you fall sick, you don't do
Mm.
well in that end term exam, the pressure, I mean, it's like a shooting graph. At the end term exam it comes down, right? So that's not the way it's got to be done. So it's got to be spread out across the year. You have the first, second, three, four, five, whatever kind of thing, so that the stress level is across a stress, not stress level, but but when you're writing the end term, it's maybe for 20 marks, 30 marks. So by that time, you already know whether you're done. You're proficient. You're good enough to
Right.
go. If you don't write the end term, you still passed because you've done
Mhm.
well all through the year.
All through the
So
year.
there is a continuous assessment of the child rather than a one-time assessment of the child, and that's important.
Right. Yes.
And then, and one last thing I would like to
Mhm.
perhaps say, one last couple of things I would like to say is sometimes we look at education as if the teacher, when he does a progression, teacher can go from primary to upper primary to whatever to the secondary as a progression in a teacher's career, and that's not true. That's not right, because there are teachers who are experts in just primary, because that's a complete specialization by itself. Like, you can't say that you are like, for a doctor, you can't say from a general physician I'll become a heart specialist, from there I'll become a oncologist, a cancer specialist. We don't say that, right? A pediatrician is as experienced and as
Yeah.
important and as different as maybe a general physician. So
Right.
similarly, a teacher who is teaching in pre-primary or primary will be in that particular section
Mm.
only, because he's specializing in that, and he reaches the pinnacle of his career in that, and there will be grades, and then he will focus on pre-primary itself. Similarly, a person who is focusing on upper primary or whatever will focus on that. So there will not be a lateral movement from one to the other, and so the teachers will be focusing on that, and they'll be specialists in that, because
Mhm.
the needs of a child at different stages of his growth are distinct, and we need to, and that has been recognized in this particular education policy, that what are the skill sets required for teachers at different things. So, and the last and but the most
Yeah.
important, perhaps, the most important thing of the education is, how do you really assess either a teacher,
Mhm.
or how do you assess a student? Now, whenever a teacher is teaching, we don't know how good he is, how bad he is,
Mm.
right? So we need to have a continuous updation of his knowledge. So there will be certain standard setting for the teachers as to how
Mm.
they will update their knowledge and what are their levels, and it could be done through technology. In fact, we will know how good is a teacher in terms of a particular subject, his ability to teach. One is, of course, his own understanding. If a teacher understands a concept well, extremely well, then he can put it across very simply. If he
Yeah.
himself is confused, he'll confuse the student too, right? So now technology is able to find out,
Mm.
that whether the concept is clear or not. For example, when Assam government has already done this experiment, and let me
Okay.
just tell you, for example, we for students more than for
Mhm.
teachers, we did the experiment. Now, when a teacher comes into a class and is teaching, say, 30 students, each of the student is understanding what the teacher is saying at a completely different level. Some students understand a little bit, some students understand very much, some students,
Yeah.
most of them, fall in between. Now, a teacher assumes that everybody has understood equally,
Right.
which is not true.
Mm.
It may be for various reasons. Maybe that student that day is distracted. Maybe that day he's attentive, or it could
Yeah.
be various reasons why the ability or maybe he has poverty at home, and therefore, or
Mm.
rather, his parents does not support him. So how do we ensure that all the students are up to speed or understand the same subjects and the concepts equally, has
Mm.
been a challenge. That is the, let's say, the crucial challenge of education, as to how do we address that the last mile connectivity is there. When a teacher is teaching a student, all the 30 students have understood the concepts
Right.
clearly. Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we do that? So we have
Mm.
experimented with something called adaptive learning. In a sense,
Okay.
a similar question is given to students not just of that class,
Mm.
across the state, not for one class, but for that class across the state for all the students. So if the student is able to answer that question, he has understood the concept. If he is not able to understand the concept, then a little bit of material is sent to him. Please read this concept.
Okay.
Some easier questions are given. When he
Mm.
understands the easier questions and he answers those questions, only then he goes to the next question. So the movement of a student from one question to the other question depends upon his understanding of that concept.
Right.
So we bring all the students up to date by making a question bank,
Mm-hmm.
backed it up with the subject material, and ensuring that the student goes from question to question, and all the students complete these 10 questions means by themselves, then all
Yeah.
students have understood these concepts by themselves. So this is an absolutely fantastic method by which
Right.
we ensure. And then there is a difference also in the sense that the question asked by a teacher is not the same as the question asked by another teacher in another school. So there
Mm-hmm.
was some teachers ask difficult questions, some teachers ask simple questions, and therefore you really don't know how the student is progressing and what is the level of complexity
Yeah.
of the concept that he's understood. So therefore, to standardize the question banks and standardize the understanding of students across the schools is important.
Mm-hmm.
So setting the question bank across the state, making all the students of that class understand the concepts to that level is the key thing that we need to do, and that's what we will be achieving. Therefore,
Right.
assessing the teachers, ensuring the reward
Mm-hmm.
incentive or
Yes.
whatever for those who are doing well, banding the teachers, ensuring that the conceptual clarity is there. Thereafter, understanding how the conceptual clarity of the students are there, level by
Right.
level, is something that we hope to achieve as far as school education is concerned.
Right. So yes, because these were some of the major concerns of the experts and many people, including the parents and all. One was the access to education, whether this particular policy is going to address all of those or not. Accountability of teachers was another factor, and like you mentioned, there'll be this whole, like at present we see that some schools they have just one teacher, some have excess, so all of these things are also going to be taken care of course. Like you have been repeatedly mentioning, this entire thing is evolving, will take a little bit of time for everything to fall in place, but uh, hopefully this policy will address most of the concerns that most of us have as far as our school as well as higher education is concerned. And you also mentioned that one big factor is the employability. Once our students, our children pass out, we often see that often the industry has also been pointing out this, that what we teach in our schools and colleges does not fit into their requirements, the industry's requirements. Hopefully all these things will also get addressed under this particular policy. So you have mentioned that Assam government, you all are absolutely involved in moving ahead so that this particular policy is implemented well in the coming days. So, would you like to share what exactly you all are doing at this point of time? What are the steps that you all are, going to take
So,
for
so
implementation?
as I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
uh, there is a huge amount of preparation that will be required. As I said, like right from Anganwadi centers.
Hmm.
Okay. For example, we already had a meeting with the social welfare department, which was there with the Anganwadis. In the Anganwadis, the primary focus is on the health of the child, the nutrition of the child, and definitely the education of the child, right? But the critical focus of bringing the
Hmm.
Anganwadi centers to co-locate with the schools to ensure that the Anganwadi centers are also brought into the school so that they progress, like from 3 years up to 7 years. Then the children like see that others are also coming to school. So in addition to their nutrition, they also start getting to learn is something that we have to do. So we identified which Anganwadi centers can be put in the schools. So right from that stage, how many teachers we require, what kind of infrastructure do we require, how do we make it, what all we have talked about, rationalization of teachers, setting of standards, setting of standards for the children, ensuring that the right number of teachers are there for the various subjects, bringing in things like, we are also talking about, for example, we're talking about, various circles, like, circle of culture, circle of chess circles. For example, we know that chess has a tremendous amount of scholastic building. So
Right.
we probably will be introducing chess in schools across the state in order to improve their scholastic abilities. So building up those networks, then building
Mm-hmm.
up school clusters. Some teachers are very good in one school. That resource can be shared with the other school, right? Instead of the student going to the other school, this
Yeah.
particular teacher can go to the other school and teach. Maybe there's a very good music teacher here, he can be used in that school's cluster. Similarly, as I talked to you about the university clusters, right?
Yes.
So the proper utilization of the resources, the material and the manpower, utilization of the resources for also the community purpose. We also have a huge issue of adult literacy, which I haven't spoken about, but
Yeah.
getting like numerical or fundamental literacy for everyone in the state of Assam, using these schools after the school hours to also
Mm-hmm.
ensure that the community learns, the parents learn also, and bring about a general improvement. We have in fact designed, or Assam government has already designed about 20 topics and more in terms of adult literacy. It's called Padna Likhna, so that everyone knows how to read, write, and also understand, we sincerely believe will make an individual holistically understand what's happening around him, right from women's rights, right from consumer rights, right from what the government needs to do, what are his legal rights. So many things which are there, which a normal citizen should know. We are trying to, do it through adult literacy. So we
Mm-hmm.
are on the job, and while we discuss and while we analyze the policy, simultaneously things which we can do, we are going to do, and those which we find hurdles, roadblocks
Mm-hmm.
through, and we will probably think through, come out with policies as and when it is
Yeah.
possible, and then the
Yes.
whole document would be ready. And once the document is ready and we allocate the finances, it will be a futuristic document, and let me assure you, we'll leave no stone unturned to ensure that the best of best policies are there, so that our children are ready to meet the future. And one question you said, that when our kids come out, whether in class 12 or after graduation, are they employable? It depends on us. See, there are a lot of things that we are not teaching the students which make them future employable, right? There are a lot
Right.
of things, like for example, in climate change, not much
Mm.
people know, but it's a huge
Yes.
thing in Germany or in France. Like, they get
Yes.
employed there. So artificial intelligence, let's
Mm.
say virtual reality, we talk about blockchain, right? These are not complex things. Now, initially they look
Yes.
complex, but kids pick it up like this.
Hmm.
It's they pick it up like this and they start doing it. We talk about bots,
Mm.
and these are things that make them. These are futuristic things which we can
Yeah.
easily impart and make them extremely, available resources for across the world. If we have to dominate the world, then our
Yes.
resources have to be able to understand and deliver on those things. So the one thing is
Right.
knowledge, second thing is attitude and skills, and
Mm.
the access, the resource
Yes.
access. So all these things have to be put in place in order to reach that particular goal.
Yes. So, of course, like we discussed before getting into the conversation, you mentioned that this is such a vast subject that we can continue for hours together, and maybe even then we might not be able to cover everything that you would want to share with our viewers and the experts and the parents and children. So, finally, what would you like to tell the parents, the students, and the academicians?
Oh, I can say that these are exciting times for two reasons. You are today in a situation, especially the students are so lucky because they can do so many things. The education field has opened up. One of the positive things happened because of COVID is that the digital resources have opened up so massively that sitting in one place you can access, whether it's Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Ivy League, Oxford, Cambridge, anything. We
Yeah.
can do so many things across the world, Singapore or Japan, So technology has given us access to doing things the way it was not possible. Okay, time and place have lost their meaning because people are available, teachers are available round the clock to you. Place is not a consideration anymore. You don't have to be in Harvard to be doing a Harvard course. So
Hmm.
place, time has lost its meaning in this situation. Content has become available. So it's an exciting time where you can pursue, given proper guidance, what you want to do. As far as students are concerned, their future is bright. Only thing it depends on me to give them a good career guidance, to give them the right path, to go in the direction where they want, and be those scarce resources which will get employed across the world. For the teachers, I would like to say that they have to be digitally smart. They have to continuously upgrade themselves with the most modern technologies. They probably will have to work much harder because time, as I said, is that now they must be available round the clock. You can't say 9 to 5. You're a teacher, a student can wake up in the middle of the night and say that I have this daughter and I need to talk, and I have to make a provision, maybe through a telephone or something. If a student has a doubt in the middle of the night, it's my dream that he should be able to pick up and call me on a toll-free number and say, "Sir, this is disturbing me. This concept, can you explain?" And I should be in a position to say, "Yes, there is a teacher available at this time to say, let's go through this question. Let's go through this question, and we have the answer for you. Let's go through it
Right.
now." So I want time should be no consideration in future, and want to put in place a place like, just like we have telemedicine, we have teleeducation. We are ready to answer your questions to the best of our ability and take you to the point of understanding where you want to go to. So that's
Right.
what I have for the teachers. You got to be real smart, real focus digitally, and take it forward too. And as far as the parents are concerned, we'll try to reach out. They have to also be
Hmm.
digitally enabled, made
Hmm.
aware, and it's my job to also ensure that there is no digital divide. With the thing that you're talking
Hmm.
about, devices
Yeah.
should be available, and digital divide should not disturb the balance of education, because inclusive education would mean that this digital divide is vanishes. So how do we do it infrastructurally is something that we have to grapple with, and then COVID has taught us that we need to take certain decisions on this front. It will obviously be at the political level, and I'm sure
Yes.
that these things will be discussed as to how to take it forward. And
Hmm.
that was something which, let me say, the Honorable Minister, Mr. Hemant Biswa Sarma, was very keen that the haves and have not, the difference between the
Hmm.
haves and have nots in education should be bridged. And how do we bridge it? In the short term, in the long term, is something that he has devolved on us. Work outcome, and he's going to do it. And you are aware that he is extremely dynamic in
Yes.
getting these things resolved. Hopefully, under his leadership and with the far side that we have,
Hmm.
we will take this step. We will take this adversity and this issue that where we are going through a sort of a depression in the world economy
Hmm.
as a stepping stone to vault over all the other states in the field of education and set Assam on a path ahead of all the others.
Wonderful. Before I let you go, of course, I'm sorry I pulled you out of a meeting. Quickly, there are a lot of concerns. One, of course, the online classes. Suppose, though there's this talk that schools, colleges might open up from September, but of course, you all are going to take feedback from every stakeholder. And I believe you have a website also where everybody can send in their feedback and suggestions. Now, there is this concern that what if online classes are extended, then the digital divide that you have been highlighting and that you have already mentioned that the minister has asked you all to come up with the way forward. So, what is the thinking there? The internet connectivity in some of the far-flung areas, access to smartphones, these continue to be a huge hassle. Even not just far-flung areas, even areas in and around some of our city spaces, smartphones for the underprivileged kids. So that's one concern. The other concern is about the larger concern is about reopening of schools and colleges. So what is happening there? And of course there was this bit of a confusion when the Ministry of Human Resource and Development notification came out, the guidelines there. Some teachers and school administration, they were a bit confused whether they should be following that particular guidelines and notification, or of course yesterday, day before yesterday, Assam government's thing came out about this is regarding the fees, where 25% fee cut has been asked for. So there's a lot of confusion on these fronts. One, the online classes, two, reopening of schools and colleges, particularly schools, and the fee payments.
Okay, so our position on all the three, let me say. About the online education, I did say that we want to bridge the digital divide
Yeah.
to the extent possible, infrastructurally, as soon as is possible. Uh, let's see how it goes. It's still a policy decision how we take it. In the meanwhile, also, when we do online education, uh, and we will bridge it at some point of time, definitely. Uh, Subject to political and economic,
Yes.
economy is going through a lot of tough times, and
Yeah.
we need to balance everything out. See, schools also have a very, very important latent function of bonding. When schools open, what is it that children are looking for? They say that I want to hold my friend.
Hmm.
I just want to hold my friend. I miss that. I want to play with him. I miss that one-to-one
Yes.
interaction, right? So education is not just about getting across an academic input or artistic
Hmm.
input or anything. It's about that bonding.
Right.
I'm sitting across, I want to touch my friend, I want to talk to him one to one, look into his eyes, is something we don't want to miss out on, right? But it has a health cost. In the sense,
Right.
when you open up schools, what is the possibility that there could be a spike in the
In
COVID
fact,
case? What
yes,
is
that's
what is
exactly what the teachers and parents are worried about. That how will you ensure social distancing between kids?
so what do, what
Exactly the
do we
point.
what do we think could be the issues with regard to
Hmm.
the spike in cases, or if some child gets affected,
Yeah.
then how do we handle it? Okay, one way is to ensure that all the teachers are like COVID free. Second thing, I can ensure that the schools are sanitized. Third thing,
Right.
I can ensure that the children are given all the facilities to sanitize themselves before coming to school. Fourth, I can ensure that there's a hospitals where specific instructions for the health teams to look after the children and ensure
Mhm.
strict protocols when the children go. Despite all this, you must understand it's a huge, huge decision for the government,
Right.
especially for the health minister to take with regard to how, when to do. It's a huge responsibility, right? How to go about it. He would obviously be understanding and the needs, because education is a fundamental right. I can't deny the children their right to grow, right?
Hmm.
At the same time, do we close it down and then, even if we have supposing a vaccine, how long when will it come?
Right.
Does it mean that we have a 1 year holiday, 2 year holiday? Kenya has declared a 1 year. They say that 2020 doesn't exist for academics. So, like, we start next year with the same class. Now, do we say that we lose 1 year?
The, yes.
Okay. And what if the vaccine doesn't come for next 2 years? Or
Hmm.
the vaccine is dangerous for next 2 years, 3 years? That means 2, 3 years is gone. Like when
Gone.
the rest of the world is opening up. No. So we need to take a middle path. See, one of the paths
Hmm.
that we suggested to the teachers, subject to opinion of all the stakeholders, was at least for class 10 and class 12. Let's have it in schools, right? With social distancing, with all the precautions, because in class 10 and class 12 they are going to get into higher education.
Right.
And do we deny that opportunity for the children of Assam to
Hmm.
get competitive into colleges, into higher education, after, and can we not provide them at least this? For the others, maybe can be like those who have it's optional. They may come, they may not come.
Mhm.
This is also optional. Class 10 and 12 also could be optional, but at least we should
Yeah.
be ready to impart education in a formal way. So we need to, one is declare a complete holiday and say, okay, you stay at home for next 2 years, right?
Right.
And we are
Yeah.
spending huge amount of money on teachers' education,
Yes.
huge. And for everything we are spending, and we are hoping that the children will learn at home through,
Mm.
whatever
Mm.
digital,
Mm.
to digital
Mm.
devices. So that's the second thing that,
Mm.
so we have to take a decision as to how do we balance out a complete,
Yeah.
like, how do we balance out a complete a closure vis-a-vis a complete opening? Is there a mid path which is a balanced kind of a risk? But what
Mm.
I would like to say is whatever the government does, it's a huge responsibility, huge
Right.
concern for the children, for the parents, for everything, and all risks taken, because we have to see education, their future, and health, and
Right.
then come out with a middle path, looking at the future. So these things
Yes.
are on the table. We have opened up a website, and we will
Mm.
request opinions, and then
Mhm.
taking all the stakeholders into consideration, certain
Yes.
decisions will be taken in the interest of the people. So I've talked to you about online. I've talked to you
Yes.
about how we are going to take a decision with regard to opening up schools.
Opening
We've
schools.
talked to you about of crossing the digital divide, and let me tell you that every child is important for us, right? And there
Right.
is nothing the honorable health minister is doing to leave anything unturned in
Yes.
terms of looking after the health, and we will do the same in supporting him to ensure that
Right.
we leave no stone again unturned to ensure that education reaches every child in a manner. One thing
Yes.
we will miss out is the bonding in schools. We desperately want the children to meet each other, but then we can't do it now because of the health concerns.
Help.
We will see how it will happen in future.
Absolutely, absolutely. So wonderful speaking to you. You've touched upon every aspect that has been of huge concern to the students. You've touched upon the academic session and everything else, the health issues. And I think it is a real blessing to have somebody like Himanta Biswa Sharma as the minister, who has a lot of foresight and a brilliant, efficient team of officers like you all backing him up. And it's wonderful to have the same person as the health minister as well as the education minister in such critical times as these, because I'm sure, to have one person handling, I'm sure it's a huge task for each one of you, including him, to be going through what we are going through at this point of time. But for us, the common man, it's wonderful to have people like you at the helm of affairs, of course, the minister there. So thank you once again for making time. And we'll come back to you whenever there are more queries from the parents, from the students, and the experts. Once again, thank you for joining me and sparing some time today for Sentinel's newsmakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.